The Lindbergh Baby Kidnapping, the crime that stunned the world. Let's dive into one of the most shocking and heartbreaking crimes in history. In the early 1930s, Charles Lindbergh was a name everyone in the world recognized. He was a national hero, celebrated for being the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean in 1927, when his small plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, took off from Roosevelt Field in Long Island, New York. Louis landed in Paris after 34 hours in the air. Lindbergh became an instant legend. Over 100,000 people gathered to cheer his arrival, and his face appeared on newspapers, magazines, and souvenirs all around the globe. But for all his fame and accomplishments, Lindbergh was a private man. In 1929, he married Anne Morrow, a talented writer and aviator in her own right. The couple sought to escape the intense public attention, building their family far from the spotlight. In 1930, their first child, Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., was born. The Lindberghs hoped to shield young Charles from the pressures of their celebrity status. They moved to a quiet estate in Hopewell, New Jersey, where they intended to live a peaceful life. But on the night of March 1st, 1932, their dreams of a tranquil family life were shattered forever. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more unforgettable and thrilling crime stories. A night of terror. It was a cold Tuesday night at the Lindbergh house. The family dog, Waygoosh, stayed strangely quiet while 20-month-old Charles Jr. slept in his room upstairs. Downstairs, Charles Lindbergh was reading, and Anne was relaxing in another room. The house staff went about their work, not knowing something terrible was about to happen. Between 8:30 and 10 p.m., someone came out of the darkness and approached the house. Using a wooden ladder, they climbed up to the nursery window. They opened the window, picked up the sleeping baby from his crib, and disappeared into the night. No one saw or heard anything. When the baby's nurse checked on him at 10 p.m., she found the crib empty. She immediately told the Lindberghs, and panic spread through the house. The police came quickly but didn't find much. All they found was a broken ladder, muddy footprints, and a ransom note asking for $50,000 to get the baby back. The note was full of spelling mistakes, making them think the kidnapper wasn't well educated or might be from another country. By the next morning, the news had spread everywhere. The kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh Jr. wasn't just a crime. It was a tragedy that shocked the whole country. The nation reacts. The media went wild right away. Headlines called it the crime of the century, and people across the country couldn't stop following the story. Many offered to help. Some searched the woods near the Lindbergh home, while others sent tips to the police, though most of these led nowhere. The Lindberghs received hundreds of letters. Some people wrote to show support, others gave advice, and some even made accusations. Reporters camped outside their house trying to find any new details about the case. The police worked non-stop, but the kidnapper was nowhere to be found. As days turned into weeks, the Lindbergh family became more and more desperate, a desperate gamble. After receiving additional ransom notes, each with higher demands, the Lindberghs decided to pay the money in hopes of securing their son's safe return. They enlisted Dr. John Condon, a retired school principal, to act as their intermediary. Dr. Condon placed an ad in a local newspaper asking the kidnapper to contact him directly. To everyone's surprise, the kidnapper responded. In a series of letters, they identified themselves as John and arranged a meeting with Dr. Condon in the Bronx. During the meeting, John accepted $50,000 in gold certificates and provided a letter claiming the baby was being held on a boat named Nellie near Martha's Vineyard. But when authorities searched the location, there was no boat, no baby, and no sign of the kidnapper. The Lindberghs clung to hope, but as weeks passed without any new leads, their optimism began to wane. Heartbreak in the woods. On May 12, 1932, a truck driver stopped in a wooded area near the Lindbergh estate to relieve himself. As he walked into the trees, he made a horrifying discovery: the decomposed body of a small child buried in a shallow grave. The body was quickly identified as Charles Jr. The child had died from a blow to the head, likely inflicted the night he was taken. The news devastated the Lindberghs and the nation. The search for a missing child had turned into a hunt for a murderer. The investigation stalls. The police were under immense pressure to solve the case, but the investigation was plagued by dead ends and false leads. Early suspicion fell on Violet Sharp, a maid at the Lindbergh estate. Her alibi for the night of the kidnapping was inconsistent, and her behavior under questioning raised eyebrows. But Violet's story took a tragic turn. On the day she was to be interrogated again, Violet ingested poison and died. Her death was a shock, and although investigators later cleared her of any involvement, it added another layer of tragedy to the case. As weeks turned into months, the trail went cold. The case seemed hopeless, until the kidnapper made a crucial mistake. A trail of gold. The ransom money, paid in gold certificates, became the key to solving the crime. These certificates, rare during the Great Depression, were easily traceable. The FBI distributed the serial numbers to banks, gas stations, and stores, urging workers to report any suspicious transactions. In September 1934, a $10 gold certificate surfaced at a bank in New York City. Investigators traced it to a gas station, where the attendant remembered the customer and had written down his license plate number. The plate was registered to Richard Hauptmann, a German immigrant and carpenter living in the Bronx. Richard Hauptmann, the man behind the crime. When police searched Hauptmann's home, they found over $14,000 of the ransom money hidden in his garage. Additional evidence linked him to the crime. The handwriting on the ransom notes matched his, and the wood used to build the ladder was traced back to his tool shed. Hauptmann maintained his innocence, claiming the money had been left with him by a former business partner, but the evidence was overwhelming. The trial of the century, Hauptmann's trial in 1935, was a media spectacle. Crowds packed the courtroom, and newspapers reported every detail. The prosecution presented damning evidence, including the ransom money, the ladder, and testimony from Dr. Condon identifying Hauptmann as John. Hauptmann's defense argued that he was being framed, but the jury was unconvinced. He was found guilty of kidnapping and murder and sentenced to death. On April 3, 1936, Richard Hauptmann was executed in the electric chair. A legacy of tragedy. The Lindbergh Baby Kidnapping remains one of the most infamous crimes in history. It led to the creation of the Lindbergh Law, which made kidnapping a federal crime, giving the FBI greater authority to investigate such cases. For Charles and Anne Lindbergh, the pain never faded. The couple eventually moved to Europe, seeking solace far from the public eye. Despite their efforts to rebuild their lives, the memory of their son's tragic death stayed with them forever. The story endures as a haunting reminder of how even the most celebrated lives can be touched by unimaginable darkness. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.